Thanks again, everybody, for joining. Nice to see all your lovely faces. My name is Fouad Jallouli, as Luis mentioned. I'm the Director of Service Design at the Government of Alberta. I run one of the largest kind of design practices in Canada, and we really do kind of a lot of interesting design for citizen services, user-centered design, as well as a lot of kind of like product release and actually creating digital solutions to problems. So I'm very lucky to be in a cool role like that, managing a very large team. You could ask me how many people later. Yeah, happy to essentially share whatever I can share about design, about leadership, about career, about the things I look for when I'm hiring or recruiting. Or about like how teams work. How do you work better together in a team, in a cross-functional team, in a complex environment, whether you're in like a small shop or in a really big one. So I'm happy to kind of talk about any of that. And as Luis mentioned, my background, I have an MBA, but my background is really kind of tech. I spent a bunch of time in technology in my first part of my career. And then I got into kind of design thinking and business model innovation, human-centered design in around 2013, 2014. And then I started to do a lot more design work, did a lot of consulting work. I worked with a local design boutique here in Calgary for a while, and then I kind of went into the government as a contractor, a consultant as a contractor, and then they offered me the director of service design position. So there's that.
Fantastic. Well, not a boring life, eh? Quite a lot of achievements. Thank you so much for what. And well, before we go on, I would like to kind of remind everybody that this is a Ask Me Anything, So for anybody that joined, please feel free to drop your questions. And I'm also inviting you to say hello in the chat. And please, if you want to connect, add your LinkedIn profile. So we all start having that post and networking possibility, right? Well, yeah, sorry for what. Going back to your experience, well, now that you are a director at the government of Alberta, I can imagine that there is quite a lot of stress, quite a lot of opportunities, quite a lot of challenges, quite a lot of dynamics with multiple stakeholders. How your day normally looks like?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. So I used to be a practitioner, of course. I was a service designer. I led quite a few big projects, and I led one of Alberta's biggest projects ever, which was the affordability program. If you all remember, there was a portal about 2 years ago where they were giving out money for people, and so I led a kind of a project that dispersed about $1 billion. And so we did it in 8 weeks. It was kind of fun. And so that was stressful. So like we'll talk about the stress part, that was quite stressful. In my role right now as a leader, I mean, primarily I'm kind of focused on a couple of different things. So I'm focused in on like, are we solving, the right problems? So I'm involved in what we call intake, which is like all the problems that come to the centralized body within government to make decisions on technology spend. So that's kind of where I spend some of my time. And so I have a team that does something called pre-assessments, which is really about figuring out, is there a problem? Is there a user need? Is there some idea of technical complexity? Is there an idea of readiness? That's one part of my job. Another part is managing my practice. So I run a big community practice within Government of Alberta. We're like a Slack channel, like we have a Slack channel. I have 95 service designers working for me. I have essentially we have like a community, a guild that we run every month where I get in guest speakers. We share across projects, across teams, information. We do a newsletter every month or maybe every quarter now around kind of what's going on in design. And then my third piece is all of the work around metrics and standards. So defining like what does design look like within government at a high level, what are the standards that we should be adhering to? And then how are we helping service designers within government make sure that they can measure their services and they have metrics and outcomes for their services that they're building. So what does that actually look like? What are they moving the needle on? And so these are like the three buckets of things that I care about. really closely, and then I'm in like all of these other concentric circles of things that I'm not the primary owner of, but I'm a stakeholder in. Things like our digital strategy, things like our some of our kind of critical projects for government as like one of the design stakeholders in it, that kind of thing. And then as well, as well as that, I also have to do all the evaluation and all the hiring of all of the designers, both the service designers and with my friend Sheldon, the director of user experience, we do together. So both the UX designers and the service designers. So we have about 170 designers total. So 90 for me and 80 for him, roughly. And we do all of the evaluation, all the hiring, all of that work. So that's also part of my job.
Wow, that's that's an army. I think it's safe to say that this is the biggest team in Alberta. Would be safer to say also in
Canada,
Canada? Yeah.
I would say
Wow.
bigger would be Shopify maybe from a like a product designer perspective. Shopify would be the biggest in Canada, but I think we're bigger than all the banks in terms of like
Wow.
design. Yeah.
That's incredible. And out of that sheer amount of talent and people that you have to coordinate, I can imagine you have to have a really good set of parameters to know who's the right candidate, who's going to be the right person that can collaborate or not.
Yeah.
How can you tell which one is the right person to bring into your team?
So it's really tough. So in the last year and a half, so I've been in the role for 2 years, I've reviewed about 1,000 designer resumes and I've interviewed about 200 people, 1,000 resumes and portfolios, and interviewed about 200 people. And then if we add the UXers, probably another, yeah, no, it would be about 1,000 together. Yeah, so about 1,000 together, and interviewed about 200 designers, and we've hired between us two in the last 10 years about 70 designers together. Like, so I've hired 50 and he's hired about 30 or 35 in the last 2 years. Um, and so what makes good candidate? It's really good. So a really good question. So for me, I'm looking for kind of a couple of different qualities. One of them is leadership. And so I'm looking for any potential people that are going to work with me or I'm going to work with. I want to know like what they led, what they what they led, what they experimented with, what they put their hand up and said, yes, like I put my hand up and I led this initiative, or I led this team, or I was the one who led the vision, the product vision, or the service vision, or yes, I led the research. And so leadership to me is really important. I think by design by nature, designers need to be leaders in a lot of ways, and often they are the expert facilitator in the room anyway, right? Maybe on the UX side, they're a little bit more introverted, maybe not, but we're all design. So if you are introverted, you should try to find ways to do more, to lead more. So that's number one. And number two, I would say is like I look for someone who can walk me through the way that they think, right? Their idea, their methodology, look through, talk a little bit about how they process information, how they get to an idea, how they build trust, how they manage stakeholders, that kind of thing. I think that's really important. Um, Typically in my process, I interview. Um, I kind of know what I'm looking for because you'll probably be in my network. So my folks are all across Canada. I have designers all across Canada working for us, not just in Alberta. And so I probably know somebody that you know if you're like applying for something that I'm working on within government. But I also look for experience around, like I said, leadership, around design. And then I look for some experience around execution. So tell me about like how you got to the end of something. Outcome, impact, value. These are really, really important things to talk about within your portfolios. Really need to talk about like the outcome, the impact, especially if you can tell a story of something end to end. That's the real hook for me. Yeah, I started it and I went all the way. I finished I went all the way to the thing. We did the thing, and this is what it provided value. So to me, that's quite important. I find that it's really really valuable. I also want to know like how you deal with stakeholders and like tough objections, right? Because as you all know that, what separates kind of junior designers from senior designers is the shift from designing for the user to designing for the space in the middle that is in between user needs, the business design and the business strategy, and the constraints around the problem. Because ultimately, like that's what's successful is something in the middle, right? It's not something that's purely driven by the citizen or by the user. Everybody's got to have value. Everybody's got to be bought into it for it to be successful. And so the senior designer understands the place in the middle, how to deal with the
Mm.
constraint, how to convince the stakeholder to buy in to what they're aiming for, how to make a big problem small and take it piece by piece. That's what a senior designer does. And I think that's really different. A lot of people are like, oh, the customer and the user, and we should do everything that they want. And it's like, no, that's not. You have to make it good for everybody, right? You have to make it good for the business because they have a strategy. They're paying me. They're paying me to design for them. So they have a strategy. They have a mandate. And so like odds are they have a goal, right? And so we need to find the place in the middle where it makes sense for everybody to be, so everybody's happy or everybody gets something. They win somewhere, right? Whether it's cost savings, better user experience, better metrics, better CSAT scores, whatever it is, has to be somewhere in the middle. So that separates the two. So I'm looking for how people address objections and how they deal with constraints. I think that's really important. And then the last thing I'll say, I know this I'm going on forever. The last thing I'll say is how they work in a team. So are they able to work in an agile team? Are they able to work in a team of people that they don't know, that they're meeting for the first time? How are they going to forming, norming, storming, like how are they going to actually build trust within a team to be successful? Because all the teams that I've worked on that were successful were all cross-functional teams. They were never like one role teams. They were always cross-functional and they always found a way to gel in between everything. And then when they've gelled, that's when the real work begins. Then it becomes, not handoffs, it becomes conversations. It becomes working sessions. It becomes a real team. And to me, that's important. So those are like the four things that I look at.
Wow, that's that's amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm really going to steal that phrase, designing for the middle. I'm sure I'm going to make a shirt or something like that, because I think that really describes kind of like a really good building that collaborative space and that area where cross-functional teammates can navigate, right? And for all of that, now that you're mentioning the stages to form a team, yeah, well, obviously, once you form it, you have to define some standards of what makes it successful or not. So for you, what's a successful team?
Oh, good question. So a successful team is a team that is aligned together, aligned in language, and aligned in like purpose, right? Like we all know what we're working on, and there's a collective understanding of the goal that we're trying to achieve. I think that's part of success. Another part of it is like a recognition that we're all humans on a team. We're not robots. We're not like machines pumping through Jira tickets or something. We do those things, but there's human pieces elements there, and there's opinions, and there's points of view, and a good team is highly highly collaborative. They will choose to jump into a meeting for an hour or two to walk through a concept, an idea, a process, a flow, instead of like waiting a week for someone to ask them about detail from a ticket. Like that's the real killer in this type of work is like people who just don't communicate and they're not open, right? And so that's another one too is openness, kind of opening the door for thinking, opening the door for many different types of roles to provide points of view. And when you have two opinions that are different, it's about, tell me a little bit more about how you see that applying here. Tell me a little bit more about your point of view. And and trying to get the team to make the decision. And so that's one thing that I think many people don't quite get, is that they think that there's an owner, like a decision maker. The team is the decision maker in most of this creative work, right? And so it's not up to the product owner or the scrum master or, I don't know, the designer or the developer or the architect. It's actually a team decision. We have to figure out what to do. And so for me, oh, and one more thing I think really important about a good team is no surprises. And so what I mean by no surprises, I mean everybody should know kind of at a high level, like what we're aiming for, what we're working on, where we're at, and where we're going. Nobody should be disappearing for 2, 3, 4 weeks and then coming back with something. Like it's just like no surprises. And no surprises for stakeholders either. So do not surprise your stakeholders, guys. Uh, they don't want surprises. They want like open, open communication, open thinking. So those are some things that make a good team.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, all of that sounds like a lot of work. It's yeah, I don't think there is an easy way to just turn on the switch and say, hey, we have a fantastic team. Any recommendations on how to get there effectively? Saying, hey, you have so many people, but still 24 hours. What can you do?
Yeah. So I think one of them is really spending the time up front, like building relationships with each other. I used to run. Like if I was on a team right now, I would have a team coffee every week. Like it's just us hanging out for half an hour every week. Sometimes we do game like Jack in the Box. Was it Jackbox games every month or two online. Have some fun for a couple hours after work. Like the idea of building a team is building like you know building closer relationships with each other. The idea as well is like respecting and actively listening to people and respecting their opinions and ideas and discussing them in a valid way. And I do think it's about helping people make decisions that they're the best suited for. So, what I don't know, I don't know that much about technology, like architecture and developmenty stuff. Like that's not me. So why would I have an opinion there? I would rather trust the people who know what they're talking about. And so let them make the decision. You know what I mean? Let them make the recommendation. I don't have to make the recommendation or the decision. And the idea is like have everybody have a place, right? To do that. And I think when you do that and you build a lot of trust and you work together and then you deliver something, then you're riding high. Then you're kind of flying, right? You've kind of figured out how to work together. You have rituals like stand ups and sprint planning, stuff like that, to help you stay connected together every day. I think that's really important. Is like you know meeting with each other. And I've been online for 4 years now, like remote. I manage all these teams remote. I was in my team when we released since 2020. We were all remote, and so it's even more hard, right? Like it's harder being online and that, but like that's why it's even more important to really work on the relationship, really work on like being friendly, being empathetic, being courteous, figuring out how people work and their styles and really working on that. I think that's the way to do that. And I think the only way you can do that is by caring about creating a good team. So you have to care that you want to have a good team to get good results. I think if you think of it as um whatever, a vehicle to get to the end goal or whatever, and you don't really care about the people that you're working with, probably not going to have a great team. You might have an okay team. Maybe they'll be cold and functional, but it's not going to be a great team. It's not going to be when somebody needs something on a Friday night because a deadline came up and a stakeholder needs something on Monday, and like you have to really rethink who's going to jump on a call with you. That's the type of team you want to have, right? So I think that's what it means to invest in a team.
Fantastic. And yeah, I love it. And something that I hear a lot is basically the common communication between the team on regular basis and pretty much coming together and gelling. And for that, obviously, everyday life sometimes throw some curves, and yeah, challenge comes. There is conflict. There's last minute situations. How do you know when a team can navigate through that, when it's ready, or if it's not ready, or even if it's ready, how can you be present and help them out to go over the circumstances?
Yeah, so sometimes there are where we see this happen is when people don't invest early on in the storming, norming, forming part of the relationship, right? They just want to go right to performing. And it really falls apart, right? What happens is people turn into this like handover machine where everything just gets hand off one by one down a conveyor belt, and it's like not a good way to work, right? If I didn't, they didn't give me enough detail. Well, it's their fault. Well, why don't you understand? Like I gave you, it's like, well, no, you need to spell out exactly. Give me all this, right? Like it gets really bad. So what I would say is, when that happens, what's really important is like a reset in terms of like agreeing as a team, what are our ways of working? Like, how are we going to create the conditions for success as a team? And can we agree on primary responsibilities for people, knowing that there's a lot of overlaps between roles, but primary responsibilities, and then like everybody has to be accountable, right, to an outcome. And so the idea is that we need to be doing retros. We need to be together, present in planning, cameras on, having conversations, not waiting. And the idea is like to promote some of these practices if teams aren't doing it. And if they cannot do it and they're unable to work together because of personality clashes, often I say that if you have a personality clash, typically we can consider maybe swapping, moving people around other team if we have the ability to reconfigure the team in different ways, different personalities and different experience levels. Um, we'll try to do that. And but if they're toxic, bye bye. Right. I think toxicity is something that we just can't really deal with. And I don't think we can afford toxicity on any sort of like high performing team. Doesn't mean we have to be like the best of buds, but toxic behavior is something that really you can't really work out of it. You know what I mean? There's no ritual, there's not enough rituals in the world to make it feel better when someone's just hyper toxic. And so I think it's about understanding like what side is it? Is it a technical skill? Is it like a technical skill issue? Oh, Fouad doesn't know prototyping very well. Okay. Uh, maybe there's something I can help him with. Or is it a like accountability problem, or is it a toxicity? Hey Sheila. Or is it a toxicity piece, right? And so I think that's important. It's identifying like where the malfunction is happening, and then determining, is this a ways of working conversation, a reset, like, what are we going to do? Who's going to do what? What are the primary roles? What's our goals for the next 2 weeks? How are we going to measure that we're moving up, like better as a team? Yeah. Increasing collaboration and doing that thing and doing that and getting kind of like a lot more in depth for a short period of time, a more intense period of time to make sure that the team can correct itself. Or if it's something else, technical skill issue or, whatever it is, then can it be addressed? If it can't be addressed, then that's another conversation, a performance conversation. Or if it's like a fundamental personality mismatch, which happens. It can happen in every org. I'm sure it happens in lots of orgs. So that also happens, and that's another type of performance problem that we have to deal with, right? But essentially, it's like, for me, it's, toxics out, right? That's my thinking.
Wow. And I can imagine that it has to be really hard to get a good grasp of everything, considering that it's online, right? So you have to be really, really a good listener. And yeah, talking about good listeners, I'm sure that we have some questions lining up. So Alex, would you like to bring the first one?
Yeah, Chris, you are up. Would you like to ask your question, please?
Hey, yeah, sure, I can do this. Hi, Fouad. Nice to meet you, man. I love what you said so far. This is really good. Um, So I'm working on a new job board called jobmap.ca, putting job ads on a map so people can have an easier way to look for work. And just basically wondering, since you tied into the government so good here in Alberta, how difficult would it be to work with Alberta to get approved to be like on a list of like, if a person's looking for work, they go to an Alberta, A-list Alberta or something and say, hey, you can go check out Job Map. It's like some type of relationships. How can I do that? That's kind of
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I have all the deets for you in terms of how to do that. I think there's like a couple of different mechanisms and paths. So within technology innovation, our minister is Nate Lubish, and he really is supportive of small business and of kind of like new tech startup and kind of new plays in the market. But the primary vehicle for that is kind of like a couple of different ways, right? There's Alberta Innovates, which is kind of like the one mechanism. So they have their grant program and they have their advisors and stuff. And I think they're doing quite a few intakes lately. So maybe somebody who's a bit more up to date knows that better than I do. But and then another one might be also getting connected with the Startup Community App platform and some of the things that they might have access to as well. Platform Calgary, if you're in Calgary, or if you're in Edmonton, Aaron, the Edmonton Regional Innovation Network, another example of someone who could do it, who could help you out. I think like those are like typically the best mechanisms to kind of get kind of some of the guidance and get the intros that you need to some of the folks that could help you. And they have funding earmarked for from the Alberta government to work on different ideas. I think like that's probably the first path forward. And then in terms of like getting on like an actual Alberta property, I'm not sure exactly how that would work, especially as a non-Alberta service. Like typically Alberta.ca is a pretty protected property, right? Like it's got to be a government service. And so there, like I said, though, there's probably other ways from a technology perspective to get in there.
Gotcha. Hey, and I got another question. I noticed the government Alberta site has a couple job maps on there somewhere. I can't remember exactly where, but were you participating in that at all?
No, unfortunately, I'm not too much on the website of it, on the website of the house. Much more on the apps that are being built for the different ministries. But on the Alberta.ca side, I don't have the details on the technical implementation of the whatever mapping. I think it's ArcGIS is what I would bet. I think that's what it is from what I know, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna be talking out of school.
Yeah, it's all good. Hey, thanks for that, man. Appreciate it. Love to talk here.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. I'm going to pass it on to Eloisa.
Hi, Fouad. Nice to see you again. I saw you back in the government talk, I think more than 1 year ago. So nice to see you again. Yeah, and I mean, you're talking a lot about your collaboration between design, and I'm assuming it's service design and UX design, and you have a tight collaboration with a UX leader. So I will leave it very open. Next question: how is that collaboration when the UX leader, when you receive an intake?
Yeah, I think naturally we're the first point of kind of stop. I think, when you talk about the difference between service design and UX design in the way that we define it, even though we are talking a lot more now as design is combined together, like it's all design, really. But we are more on, is there a problem worth solving? And, it's a really good analogy, right? Are we building a car or a boat or a plane? And then the UX director and the UX side is, what is the shape of the car? What is the wheelbase? What is the color? And so naturally, that means that they are more production focused, right? They're more focused on the specific intervention about like, what is the experience of that thing, that one thing, not the system or the service level experience. They're really zoned in on a very great user experience of something specific. And so it kind of goes from my big funnel down towards the smaller end of the funnel.
Service design starts with a problem and the pre-assessment that you were talking, and then it's a collaboration start.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And so as we get closer to lower fidelity, mid fidelity, high fidelity, prototyping, accessibility, usability, production, that's where the real, UX design comes into play, right?
Experience.
Content design, IA, all of those pieces. Like for me, like I'm not a UXer, right? And so I probably could intuitively know what a good UX could look like, but like I don't have what's in my head how to make, the next Apple, right? And so it's definitely it's a little bit of a different view. It's making the one experience very good compared to
Yeah.
looking at the problem at a higher level.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next will be Shane with a question about metrics.
Hi, Fouad. Nice to meet you. You mentioned three main, I guess, areas of focus, the third being metrics. Can you give an example of how you've used metrics to measure outcomes? Like what was the service or product being measured and how was it measured?
Yeah, great question. So many different things. So the preamble is metrics are contextual to the service that you're creating. That's kind of like rule number one. Rule number two is we always start with current state thinking when it comes to a service. So we want to know if it's a new, if it's mostly it's based off an existing service or an existing process. We want to know the benchmark of what it takes to get through that process or that service. And so one of the clear metrics is like, how long does it take for me to find the information required to apply for a thing, right? And then how long does it take for me to get a response? Or how long does it take for me to fill in the application? How long does it take for me to get a response? How long does it take for me to get my outcome or my result, right? And so those are all kind of unique to different products and services that we're building. A really good example of one would be a metrics related to childcare providers. One of the program objectives of childcare was the idea to reduce application application times. And so one of the key metrics was not only how long, it really wasn't about like how long it took for them to fill in an application for childcare support. It was about the backlog that was created, and it was taking the team 90 days to get through to a file. And so one of the key metrics that the work that we had to do had to make the processing time shorter. And so a key measurement there was the time to, digitization of a form and a digitization of the backend process to be able to make quicker decisions and complete the application quicker, complete the response to the application quicker. And so a good example was, I think it was like when it first started at the beginning of COVID, it was like 90 days, and they got it down to a week within 8 months or something like that, or 6 months. And so that's massive, right? Like you're talking millions of dollars of savings just from, digitizing something and making an automated dashboard that allowed people to quickly look at the request, fill in notes, and approve, as opposed to getting paper, mailing it back and forth, the whole gig. So that's an example of metrics. So the idea is that every service needs to have some defined metrics. They might need to spend a couple of weeks early on benchmarking current state. What is it taking people to do that? Is it taking me? It's taking me 6 weeks or 90 days. Where in that process is it taking the most time? Oh, I'm actually waiting. When someone has a wrong piece of information, I have to mail them a letter, and that letter takes 20 days, and then the response to the letter, and then I had like, oh, that's where the real issue will go. Let's remove the mailing step, right? And so the idea is defining those pieces, and they're typically tied to, in our context, mandate and program objectives and evaluation, like program evaluation. So how do we know we're moving the needle? Are we actually moving the needle on things that we care about? And so you will hear sometimes if you're a nerd in evaluation metrics, you might hear logic models. And so like, have they created a logic model for their service? What is the inputs? What are the outputs? What are the expected behaviors of how a service should be and what qualitative metric are we moving? Sorry, what quantitative metric are we moving? And then what qualitative experience are we creating that's better? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and that's funny coincidence because I've personally benefited from that example you spoke to as a parent who's had to make a couple changes to my child care subsidy application. I was
Nice.
impressed with A, how quick the response time. I think maybe mine was 2 weeks, and B, that
Yeah.
that level of service where someone picked up the phone and called me and told me, "Oh yeah, you just need to do this, this, and this." And then like 2 weeks later, they said, yeah, we still have to mail you the update. So I got it in the mailbox. But that phone call saved another couple of weeks. So yeah, thank you for your work on that.
Yeah, it wasn't me personally. It was one of my designers somewhere. One of the designers, I know who it is, but one of the designers. That's an example of one of my designers working on one of the teams in childcare.
Great. Thanks so much.
So,
no problem.
next, we'll pass it on to Rebecca Harper.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Rebecca.
I was doing my big drive back from Vancouver Island yesterday and tuned into Paul Bellows' 311 podcast and listened to a bunch of old ones that he's had, including one where he talked to Dominic Bond of Governor Alberta. And she was talking about a really cool 25 and 25 initiative that the team was looking to undertake kind of in 2021, basically like 25 key projects in 25 months. And I'm just wondering, like, whatever happened with that? Like, did it actually get done? And if so, like, what was the impact? And how have you used that to kind of propel more growth and interest in the team?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty accurate.
Cool.
So if right now we're 88 teams, in 2021, when I started, I was on team 6 when I started in 2020, right at the beginning of COVID. And I think by 2021, we were maybe up to 12 teams or maybe a little bit more than that. And I think in 2022, we were up to about 40 teams. Or maybe 35 teams. So like probably pretty accurate. And when she said 25 and 25 key projects, I think that's something that's really important to understand. Like what are things worth solving?
Yeah.
AISH is one of them, childcare is another one. Advanced education, student loans is another one. And so these are all really important things. And I think you have to find the right use cases for design-led work. You can't force it on everything in the organization. You can't force it on the only path forward. You need to have kind of a whole bunch of different ways to think about it. And there are different approaches. So you got to find your key use cases, find your key projects, find leaders who are interested in thinking about things in a more iterative, agile way. And those are good candidates for working in our way.
Thanks.
Okay, and the next question is from Sheila. I will ask it for her. If we have time, sorry, no, that's not. Are there industries that benefit the most from service design? And are you able to give an example of how service design made a big impact?
Oh, it's everywhere. Anywhere where there's a customer, you can do service design. I'll tell you where it doesn't make a good impact. How about that? And then we'll do the other way. So it doesn't make a good impact in areas that are focused on highly technical innovation. So let me give you a very good example. When you're building a bridge, you don't want agile and you don't want iteration and you don't necessarily want feedback. You want a very structured and engineered plan from A to Z, okay? In a very methodical, repeatable way. When you're working on a design project, you are building in space for a dynamic understanding of your user, changing landscape, changing market, changing customers, changing segments, right? Changing user needs. And so industries that don't do well with this thinking, or where we shouldn't force this thinking necessarily on them, are things like sometimes like oil and gas. Like technical innovation and the engineering innovation required in certain areas, Luis, in certain areas, like you know, like, I mean, if you're going to talk about how they're extracting a barrel of oil, the design thinking process might be a difficult one to discuss with them, because they're quite focused on a process, right, on an engineering process. And so if there's no end user, if there's no customer, or they don't care about the customer's experience or the employee's experience, it's also very difficult. In terms of like who benefits from it, I mean, you can see it all over LinkedIn, right? Like everybody is doing design at this level. Banks, they have huge retail customers. They have customers who are focused on everything from retention to investment to wealth management to in-person versus online banking. Retail, like Lululemon, I was talking to the design at Lululemon not too long ago. Their design about their e-commerce and the way that they understand how they work on and how they attract and make products and offerings, how they retain customers. Like loyalty is such a big thing in retail. Telco, same thing. How do they get customers and retain customers? Obviously, government is huge, right? Social sector, the social services sector, right? Healthcare, pretty much anywhere with a customer benefits from design, and obviously tech, right? Because they have customers, right? So tech has end users, customers. And so I think like that's a good example. And I mean, you can see the splashes of design everywhere. You know, famously, you know, I'll use the Apple example. Apple was the original vision for Apple was very much user-centered design, right? It was all about completely disrupting the market and really creating a really unique and new user experience that blew everybody away and changed like mobile technology forever, right? And so like that was a good example of design, right? Design at a fundamental level. When John Ivan and those other folks, when they were working on what that meant, a lot of it came to the user experience and design, and service design is a part of that, right? It's a part of that kind of like problem solving tool belt that you have to help you understand which problems are worth solving and then getting into the experience pieces. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Awesome. And the next one, I'll pass it on to Natalie.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for your experience and sharing it with us. It feels like a lot. I really feels like I wrote like really long question, but I'll try to make it shorter. I'm trying to, as product designer team of one in software company, B2B, that creates products for car dealerships. It's kind of, I'm trying to find a way to find this collaboration between departments to make it more efficient and make this process. I feel responsible for all the products. I feel that they are all my babies. I want to improve them, but we also have product managers. They feel the same. And development team, they have their own vision. And I try to find a way to make this collaboration really efficient. And I'd really value any recommendations on how to strengthen this connection and improve collaboration.
Yeah, so I think there's two things that I heard there. There's maybe an internal collaboration piece, and then there's an external collaboration piece in terms of like how are you showing the value of your work and of design at a higher level. And then I think inside of your team, we covered a little bit about some of those things around really taking the time to build relationships and getting into a cadence and something that you can do where you're working as a team. It's one thing to like want to be a team, but you have to work as a team if you want to be a team. And so how do you set up the structures inside of your working week to make you do you have a touch point with your PMs every day? Are you bringing your devs into sprint planning or your own like working session? Like you have to create the spaces for these people to be able to do that. So I think that's one way. So you can think a little bit about what, if you were to structure your day, structure your week, let's say you have 40 hours, probably 10 of those hours need to be planning hours. like this is my opinion. Like I think I would be planning for 10 hours of the week between stand-ups, sprint planning, if I was doing agile, working together, working sessions, conversations. I want to be seeing them 1/4 of the time. Like and then I have quiet time to think and facilitate workshops and gather requirements and user needs and write user stories and whatever, epics. But I need to be like that level, right? Like 25% of my time needs to be planning. And so think about the ratio that you need. Is it 10%, 20%, 25%? Maybe early on it's 30%, 40% early. And then now we're in a good place and now it's only 20% or 15% of my week because we're established. So early on, you have to spend more time building that relationship, building that trust. And then when everybody starts handling their places, then you can start to get more of your time back. That's number one. Now, the external communication. When was the last time you did a design insights or a demo to the company?
To the company or to like user interview to our customers?
No, to the company.
To the company, not the development team, not the...
Yeah, to the executive. Your boss's boss, CEO.
When we do like go to market, it's more like just, only when we have everything done.
Like a launch, only when you launch. Okay. So a good example is every 2 weeks, I would do a show and share, and I would invite all of my stakeholders to it. Remember I said earlier, no surprises, right?
Okay.
And so maybe it's not every 2 weeks for you, maybe it's every month. That's fine. But I invite them in, and I don't have to demo them software. I even share with them my observations and when I went through a place or the insights from a workshop or something interesting that I learned in the last 2 weeks. And if I have something technical to show them, I'll demo that too. Or I'll have the developer demo it as an example. But the idea is, if you want to increase collaboration with your executive, you have to give them opportunities to collaborate. And so there's a very big difference between showing them and reporting up. You'll probably need to do both of them. But one is completely different. One is about creating an environment of trust and collaboration, and like they can see the value of what you're talking about. Oh, this is why you're doing research. Look at all these amazing insights you're learning about your customers. I can see how that's going to make my product better as the CEO or as the VP or whoever is in your company. That's not the same as you giving a status report to them about this is what I'm working on, or red light, green light, whatever, scope, budget, cost. They're different things. And so if you want to create more a culture of collaboration, you have to open it up and not be afraid to, be a little bit polished, but not too polished, don't be very polished, but you need to, create a way. I bet you it'll blow them away. I would bet you. And people, they love that. Like I used to invite some like associate VP ministers into workshops with me, and they would just observe, and not say anything, or they'd watch an interview with me, or they'd sit in an interview. They don't have to do anything. You just have to listen, and it changes the way they think about what you're working on. So, just some thoughts. There's lots of strategies there for sure.
Thank you so much. That's a lot to think about and change my mindset. Thank you.
Awesome, great. Next, I hope I pronounced this correctly. If not, please let me know. McKenna?
Yeah, you got it right.
Awesome.
Alex. Hi, Fouad. Great to see you again. I had a kind of follow-up question from what came up before about the work that you did in building a dashboard and digitizing the processing timelines and processes. When you were talking about the distinctions between UX and service design in the government, what would be an example of the scope difference in in what UX would do versus service design in a project like that?
Yeah, good question. So service designer would be the primary facilitator, the owner of the product vision, the owner of the journey at a high level, the owner of the current state understanding. They would be the primary connector with the stakeholders and maybe with the policy and the legislative folks to understand what the law and what the policy is around something. And essentially, like, I was working hand in glove with my UX designer. We were in every meeting together because I needed her to be my right hand lady. Like, she would help me facilitate, help me collect, take notes in a different way than I'm taking notes. Like, she would help me everywhere. So it's very much a Venn concentric circle, right? The overlapping circles. And so that's great. And so she relied on me to focus on managing up and getting stakeholders and trying to understand a little bit about the vision of this. What is the thing that we're building at a high level? And then for her, she's going to be the one who's going to know what the experience should look like. What should the thing, how should it be structured? What it should look like? What does the UI look like? What does the experience look like? You know, they're doing all the production work, the mock-ups. I might have created a data flow, like a process flow or a blueprint or a map, future state map, something like that. And then they're the ones really testing ideas and concepts and prototypes of how this looks. Maybe she's helping me create a storyboard to present to some stakeholders about some possible futures, right? But so I own the problem and the high level and managing up and like where we're at. And she would help me with like, and then eventually like writing user stories, getting into UI interaction. And so that's kind of how we would split. And I would still do end-to-end testing. I would still test. We would still review ideas together, but I don't know more than she does about how it should look. She knows better than me. So that's where she plays, and I play in the kind of prime facilitator, the prime facilitator and strategist space.
Yeah, that's super cool that there's that collaboration. I have a couple I have a couple other questions, but I know that we're running close to time, so just want to pass it forward and maybe circle back if there's time.
Thank you. So one more question, and that's from Nee, a fellow service designer in Vancouver. Let me know, Nee, if you can come off camera or off mute and ask your question. Okay, I'll bring it up. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
So I think my question is that, as mentioned, I'm from the strategy team. So we are working on projects that is not precedented, haven't happened before. So as part of the proposal, we need to, again, get approval before we want to do something. So a lot of them, we don't have number to prove, and just harder to get number to prove on certain things. So you can't have a big picture saying doing this project will increase X amount of percentage in user engagement, for example. So suggestion on doing projects like that.
Yeah, so maybe my question to you would be, how do you even know that it's a problem?
Mostly based off report, the OKR and year-end report. And then as part of the directions of that particular year, to say related to small business, then we will go through the report related to that small business, and we suggest that we need to do redesign of the small business onboarding, for example.
Right. And so, I mean, I think that's the first question, right? Is like, what's, do we have an idea of what even the problem space is, number one? And then how are we validating that this is an actual problem? And so if you were to approach me and say, Fouad, I'm a bank, I'm having a customer retention problem, or I'm having an onboarding problem with small business, the first thing I would do would be to, get information about what there was there. And then I would be like, okay, here's my research plan on how I want to talk to these small businesses to understand the current state experience. Like, how are they onboarding right now? What does that look like, right? And so if you're doing that work right now, what I think is really important if you're trying to get buy-in to the next step of like, what is the potential future, one of the things that we've done is when we do discovery, so like a more formal discovery phase up front, where we do a lot of interviews, maybe observation, ethnography, whatever it is that we're doing, research, we end up typically at the end of this discovery phase with some sort of current state journey that talks about barriers within the journey by role, right? Like where in the journey is there issues, and where are the barriers that people are facing, and at what phase of the journey, right? And then from there, we try to think of these insights and we pull them out into what we'll call opportunity cards, opportunities. And these opportunities, you can imagine, are some information about our results that have some qualitative, some quantitative information, and maybe some future thoughts about one of those areas that we could go after. And the whole goal is, if I come out of like a discovery, research discovery, with 3 or 4 opportunities, I go to my stakeholders and I say, these are the 3 opportunities that we see in the small business onboarding. What do we think would be a place to explore further based on effort, time, complexity, some metric, some matrix of 2 by 2, or 3, maybe it's three things. And I get the stakeholders to think about where they would be interested in exploring a little bit further. And we work on one of those opportunities into concept testing, prototyping, low fidelity, storyboarding, that kind of thing, right? And then we get more generative, right? So we've done some research and now we start ideation and generative work. After I've gotten the stakeholders to agree that there's something here that looks juicy. Like, based on my research, I understand that these small business people were falling off, 50% of small businesses are falling off the onboarding process right here. Okay. And now I want to explore what that looks like in deeper detail, and I want to ideate around that. And you get the permission from your stakeholders to proceed with that. And so I know it sounds simple, and I know it's not that simple in a bank or in any organization. The key point I want you to take away from this is that you need to create a moment for your stakeholder to provide input. They need to be able to help you prioritize, help you make a decision. That's what they need. You telling them what you should do, they can resist that. But you giving them 3 options and saying, these are the benefits and pros and cons, and this is areas that we should explore, help me pick which one, engages them. That's the really important part there. It's the engagement part.
Can I ask one more questions related to that? Is that okay?
Yeah, we can go over, by the way. Are we okay to go over till 8:15? Can you guys stay till 8:15? Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, or
We just have one more person that has been waiting patiently, so if that's okay, we can revisit.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll come back. We'll come back.
Ryan, do you want to come up here and ask a question?
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for arranging the chat. It's really informative. So is there any decision-making frameworks that you kind of utilize when you're trying to decide on a product's roadmap and if you need to pivot or not?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to look at that. I think number one, it depends on kind of like what approach you're using for product development and how you're moving forward on like how you're building your product. Very often what I do is I'm a big fan of like an MVP style approach. And so what that means is that there's like 4 categories of things that I want to be thinking about when I'm getting ready to release, or what's in my first release. I think it's like absolutely understanding like what are the bare minimum mandatories that need to be in there? What are the things that we should have in the product that is going to make delight the customer? And then what are some things that are interesting, but not, not as critical. And then what are things that are like all cosmetic or all kind of non-obligatory, right? And so the idea is to really get good at trying to determine what those 4 buckets are early on. And and the only way that you're going to do that is by having a relatively well-structured and thought out like ideation phase of the product, right? And so when you're looking at a prototype or you're looking at kind of different experiences and different feature sets, I think the key is to like figure out what that underlying thread is of the things that you absolutely have to have in the product, and then try to put forward some options on the minimal side of that, on like what does that experience look like on the minimal release, right? And so depending on your startup or your product company, I mean, I would bet that if are you retail, like are you B2C, or like what's your business model around your product?
For one of the projects that I'm working on is a B2C project.
Right. And so it's all about like customer acquisition revenue, like time to revenue. If it's a paid product, and it's customer acquisition, it's all about signups and time in app. And so you got to really kind of prioritize making a very dead simple onboarding, as an example, simple onboarding process. Like that becomes a critical, even though if it was like, oh, we could do that later, because we really care about, I don't know, whatever the thing does. It's like, no, probably onboarding and the sign up process is critical, like number 1 criticality to the app, right? Like you want the user to be able to click 2 buttons and be in the app, essentially, and then they can fill out what they need to fill out later. And so that's an example of like just knowing a little bit about the patterns that make sense in your industry for your app. I think that'll help you prioritize some of the features. But I think like the way you do it, if you had a blank slate, would be just to make sure that you've ran your prototypes and your concept testing with real customers earlier on. They don't have to be real prototypes. They can be concepts. They can be ideas, and giving them the ability to tell you like, hey, if I waved my magic wand, what are some of the things that I wish I had? And so like that helps you understand a little about what people desire, but you're not going to know the real behavior until you do like real usability and real testing with users on like what they're actually using. And that will inform your direction.
For sure. Just one more really quick question. So you had mentioned before that you've looked at hundreds of portfolios. Is there one that really stood out?
Thousands.
Most?
I don't even know. They all blend together. I'll tell you something. So here's a cool fact. Everybody's portfolio is good. There's nobody's portfolio who's not good. So at that level, like at a certain level, everybody's portfolio is pretty damn good. What I'm looking for are, can you show me where you led? Back to the kind of the earlier discussion, right? Can you show me the things that you led on? I think being a part of a successful team and leading a successful team are different. So show me the things that you've led. Show me how you think. Show me a bit of your process. I want to see rough. I don't want to see Behance portfolios. Like that's useless to me. I don't want to see high fidelity bullshit screens that no one could ever really make because they would never be used. Like that's not a good portfolio to me. I care more about how you solve the problem. I figured out the problem. I understood my user. I did some interviews. I put together a bit of a journey. Then I went into ideation, and then I explored what it looked like, and that to me is what I'm looking for. And so I'm really looking for that, like more end to end, how the sausage is made as a designer, as a design leader, or as someone who hires a lot of people. That's what I care about. Definitely Behance portfolios are like not good. I don't know, Luis, maybe you have maybe you have a different point of view on this, but I tell you, I've seen thousands of portfolios, thousands. And like, as soon as I see one of those, I say, okay, and what user used that? Oh, it was just bullshit. Oh, somebody just made it. Like someone made it in Figma and like put it in their thing. It's like, dude, but did anybody use the app? Tell me about the app. You know what we'll do if we see that and we happen to be in an interview and we notice that, we'll be like, who used the application? Like, did they use it? Like, oh no, it's actually you. It's just like, that was a concept. It's like, okay, then it's not real.
It's a mock case study.
It's just, yeah, it's just a case. It's not real. I want real things. Show me a real app that you built. Show me something that you really did. So that's really important.
Thanks.
Yes, that's the difference between a documentary and a movie.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. I want the documentary, guys. I want to know the details.
That's excellent. And yeah, we could spend a lot of time learning more about the details of how you manage teams, how you go cross-functionally. Is there any opportunities we can learn more from you? Any other chances out there?
Oh, I'm around on about. Connect with me on LinkedIn if you're not connected with me already. I have a couple of things going on. I have a course on UXL right now. So does anybody have Excel memberships? If they don't have one, you can use my link. And I have a course on cross collaboration with teams. So that's a cool place to go. And then I'm releasing another course on design within government and complex public organizations. So I'm releasing that one soon too. So you can find me there as a contributing expert. I'm also on the Discord if you are around. If you don't know who Excel is, Louis can share. Maybe Louis, you can share a link or something to that thing. And yeah, check out my course and let me know what you think. Excel is like a platform, kind of like Duolingo type of thing, right? Like you learn and you get access to a community and like lots of UX, like portfolio reviews and all kinds of things. And so they have some service design stuff there that I've been working on. And then this cross-functional teams course. That's where you can find more information. Of course, I do some talks. I'll be speaking at UX Camp, I think, in Calgary. Yes, Luis?
Yes,
I'll be speaking
please.
at UX Camp in Calgary. Whenever the date is, March something. Yeah, Rebecca. So I'll be there. If you're around, I'll be there. If you're at the next Service Design YYC meetup or the next UX Calgary meetup, I'll try to make it in person if I can. If you're in Edmonton, I go to Edmonton as well. Vancouver, not so much. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't go to Vancouver often right now, but I'm up in Edmonton next week, as an example, doing some leadership work up there. But I'm around. You can ping me.
Fantastic. And well, also, what is the best way to reach out to you? Like
LinkedIn's probably the best way.
LinkedIn's the best way. Fantastic.
If people need any sort of career coaching, kind of more formal coaching, I also do that as well. I do executive and more formal design coaching, interview prep, the whole shebang review if people are looking for that. So that's something that I've started offering recently, and I'm working on a credential, my coach credential right now. So yeah, another thing I do on the side.